Complete and indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. You're going to notice we're going to step it up with shorter videos, but more videos throughout the coming weeks. And there is just no shortage of news items to analyze and break down, and of course, propaganda to cut through as well. So we're going to start today talking about crony collectivism. Oh, I know, we always hear it as crony capitalism, but let's face it, it's the collective. It's when capitalists or when corporate entities get into bed with government, that's when crony collectivism is at its best. And boy, were the corks popping and celebration going on earlier this week as the Idaho Launch Program celebrated its open application window, a $75 million program, a new post-secondary grant program meant to provide financial aid for 9,000 to 10,000 high school graduates pursuing a job in an in-demand career. By the way, I looked at a list of some of these jobs, and I had no idea that there were so many clerks that were in demand. That I don't know. That says something about society, but I'm not sure exactly what. Anyhow, let's take a look at how this is being reported by IdahoEdNews.org. Idaho Launch officially got off the ground Tuesday morning. The state began taking applications for the new post-secondary grant program, which could provide financial aid for 9,000 to 10,000 high school graduates pursuing a job in an in-demand career. Now, not all of them were clerks, but it was surprising, of the numbers of jobs that they listed and how many thousands or how many hundreds of these positions were expected to need to be filled in the coming days. Clerks. Clerks were at the very top of the list, and I just thought that was curious. That speaks to a lot of bureaucracy. Nonetheless, Idaho Ed News reports some students got off to an early start. The application portal opened at 8 a.m., and 19 seniors applied within the first 15 minutes, said Sharon Rayberry, launch manager for the Workforce Development Council, the state agency in charge of starting up the program. Meanwhile, the liftoff began with more than a few questions about the new program and with some ceremony. Now, of course, the governor's taking a victory lap, right? He was working on this for well over a year. On Tuesday morning, an hour after the kickoff, Governor Brad Little was on the Boise State University campus signing a proclamation hailing the launch program. Little told reporters, "I really want to urge all Idaho students to sign up now and get in the queue." During the signing ceremony at Boise State's Micron Center for Materials Research. Well, of course, he's excited. This is something he pushed for. But there's more to it than just simply, well, what a great idea, and I'm sure the governor's glad that it was finally passed, by the legislature. There's more to that story, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, launch recipients can receive $8,000 covering up to 80% of tuition and fees. Students can put that money toward four-year college, community college, career technical education, or even job training. The top priority is to support students pursuing an in-demand career, 242 occupations that require some education or training beyond high school. Now, again, on the surface, who could object, right? Getting more kids ready to get into the workforce, more young people ready to hit the ground running. But you got to stop and ask, is this a proper function of government? Now, supporters see launch as a way of supporting high school graduates who aren't necessarily looking for a four-year college degree and might want to enter the workforce more quickly. They also say launch will help Idaho businesses find qualified applicants for hard-to-fill vacancies. So this is pretty much the tone that much of the corporate press in Idaho has taken. Look, this is going to help these students recently out of school train and find jobs, which, again, on the surface sounds great. Now, they do give a little grudging nod to those who are not in favor of this bill. For Little, the start of the launch program represents a milestone more than a year in the making. In September 2022, he convinced legislators to put $80 million a year into an in-demand career fund. The one-day session provided funds for launch, which passed a deeply divided legislature. Deeply divided? Well, because some hardline conservatives dismissed the program as a giveaway to Little's political allies in the business community. So apparently these hardline conservatives, look, this is judgmental words like hardline. That's a judgment on the part of the reporter there. This is editorial masquerading as a news story. And as far as them dismissing the program as a giveaway to Little's political allies in the business community, well, let's take a little bit more, a little bit deeper look first. Okay, that's one possible objection. Well, he's doing this to pay off his friends in the business community. That's one possible objection. Here are three other objections pointed out by the Idaho Freedom Foundation, which analyzed the bill back in January when the legislature was in session. Number one, workforce training is not the proper role of government, nor is it the responsibility of the Idaho taxpayers. This is the first and foremost consideration that anybody should have as to whether or not this is a great program or a terrific program or an okay program. Should government be doing it in the first place? The answer is no. Businesses and private industry should train their own workforces, not outsource the responsibility and cost. House Bill 24 creates a large government program that serves to make funding of workforce training a government responsibility. That's the first major objection. Okay, here's another one. House Bill 24, which this law was passed on, or this program was based on, provides grants of $8,500 per high school graduate. Now, when government uses tax dollars to subsidize training or education, that is an involuntary redistribution of wealth. In other words, the government didn't create that money. It was productive citizens, productive businesses, people who actually had to put time, effort, work, and even risk their own money to create the value necessary to generate that revenue, which was then taken from them by government and now is being redistributed, whether they agree with it or not. It sounds like a great idea, but if it was such a great idea, wouldn't people be doing it voluntarily? Something to think about. So there's a second objection. Here's the third objection. And again, this is based on the principles of good government. House Bill 24 says if eligible student applications exceed available funding in a fiscal year, grant awards shall be prioritized first based on the pursuit of in-demand careers. If additional funds remained, prioritization shall then be based on financial need. So these statutorily designated priorities show that the program is not neutral in terms of its recipients. In other words, those pursuing certain careers will receive priority. In this way, the government picks winners and losers, predicting or more realistically guessing what careers will have the greatest demand in the future. Does that sound like a proper role of government? Again, to Governor Little and to his cronies, I'm sure, yes, of course. We're just trying to do for people what they can't do for themselves. But these are three very good reasons why the bill was not a good idea, in addition to the cost to the taxpayers. So let's now tie this to why this is a big deal, because there were certain people who benefited from this within the business community. And again, we go to idahoednews.org. Never too early, dueling endorsements in the 2024 legislative races. So who are these players? Who are the ones that likely would be benefiting from this launch program? In other words, friends of the governor. Well, the Republican primary is months away, really several months away, but two competing lobbying groups are already rolling out 2024 legislative endorsements. The early selections break some news on several GOP primary contests between current and former legislators. And not surprisingly, there is zero agreement between IACI, the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry Endorsements, and the Idaho Freedom PAC picks, foreshadowing another bitter Republican primary next spring. I think Kevin Reichert's actually kind of enjoying this prospect, but look at how this breaks down and then tell me that IACI, a powerful state house business lobby, some would say it's one of the most powerful lobbies in the legislature, unveiled 34 Republican endorsements over social media last week. Idaho Freedom PAC, the campaign arm of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, announced its first 6 GOP endorsements on Monday, with more to come in November. So let's just look briefly at a couple of these. Targeted incumbents. IACI is looking to unseat 2 Senate hardliners. Now, they targeted Brian Lenny and Scott Herndon, who, by the way, I mean, don't take this as an endorsement, just as an observation. These guys are very, very good and very effective at defending the principles of limited government. Better than most. And they have a sense of humor and actually seem to enjoy what they're doing. I had to laugh at Brian Lenny's picture of himself, propped up with his feet by the fire and saying, just thinking of all the ways I'm going to spend that dark money, because that's the big accusation. Well, he's not doing anything out of principle. It's because dark money is flowing to him. Okay, whatever. So now you have IACI endorsing Lori Bishop over, again, what they refer to as 2 Senate hardliners. So Lori Bishop over Tammy Nichols, Alex Caval over Glenita Zuderveld in Twin Falls. Now, again, I've watched Senator Nichols. I've watched Glenita Zuderveld. These are really principled leaders. In fact, it's amazing that they got elected just because, they are an exception to the rule. Most legislators are very squishy, or they talk the talk, but they do not walk the walk. These are two ladies who walk the walk and can be counted on to do the right thing, regardless of whether it is popular or not. That's just not in most politicians' constitution. Other education connections, IACI is endorsing several moderates. I mean, who could be against a moderate? Now, this is kind of a catchphrase for people who ostensibly are a little bit Republican, but not really walking the Republican walk. They're moderates. They're not these hardliners, right? Judgment based on political leanings. This is supposed to be a news article, but it reads more like an editorial. So they list off a few of these. So bottom line, and I thought this was actually pretty appropriate. Scott Herndon says, today, Idaho increases its socialism with a big, expensive new government program that 15 Republican senators opposed. The 13 remaining R's joined the 7 Ds to get this done. And then IACI, the big corp lobbyists, endorsed these 13 R's for bringing them gravy train. That's how it's done. That's how the game is played. And now you have a little bit better understanding of why, yes, they may be popping corks and celebrating at the governor's office and within the corporate collectivist complex there, but it's not the proper role of government, and it never was in the first place, which is really where questions, this is where we have to start our questions. It may be a really neat idea, and yes, people would really appreciate that, but if it's not the right thing for government to do, then it shouldn't be done by government. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.